দর্শক আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি চ্যানেল 24 এর নিয়মিত আয়োজন জানতে চাই শুনতে চাইতে আজকে আমরা কথা বলবো রোহিঙ্গা ইস্যুর আন্তর্জাতিক প্রেক্ষাপট এবং বাংলাদেশ ও মিয়ানমার কে কতটুকু এগিয়ে এসেছে এই সমাধানে, সেই প্রেক্ষাপটগুলো নিয়ে আমরা আলোচনা করব। এ বিষয়ে আলোচনা করার জন্য আমাদের স্টুডিওতে অতিথি হিসেবে আছেন UNHCR এর অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট হাই কমিশনার ফর প্রোটেকশন মিস্টার ফলকার তাক। Welcome to the show. Before coming to Bangladesh this time, you also went to Myanmar. I'd like to know your observation of 2 days trip in Myanmar and who are the people you meet, what are the things they promised you to again, and what's your take would be to your High Commission.
So we went to Myanmar just last week, and it was for 2 days to actually meet with the government of Myanmar and to have a discussion about the right of return of the Rohingya people, especially those who fled to Bangladesh over the last couple of weeks. For us, it is important to start a dialogue with the government of Myanmar on how we can start working on the conditions for return, on the obstacles that are currently there to return, and to actually talk about the right to return of people, and in particular the Rohingya people from northern Rakhine State and from Rakhine State who fled to Bangladesh.
Okay, and who are the people you meet there?
So we met with different ministers, so different parts of the government. We wanted to learn from them what it is that we can do in terms of supporting them, in terms of the process for return. And we got to understand that indeed there's a bilateral process going on between Bangladesh and Myanmar about these discussions. And we offered, given the fact that the international community has entrusted UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, with the task of providing protection to refugees, to have a discussion also about possible solutions. And one of the solutions that we want to work with is the possibility of voluntary repatriation of refugees back to their home country in safety and in dignity. And that's the discussion we had with the government.
And the discussion went well?
The discussion was a start, because of course at the moment the situation is still chaotic. We still have people who flee into Bangladesh. I mean, I was in Cox's Bazar yesterday, I witnessed it myself. So it's clear that in this very difficult phase, you're not going to get immediately a positive response. But it was important that we had a discussion, that we were received by the government, that we could put the issues on the table, and that we clearly indicated to them that there is the right to return of the Rohingya refugees, and that we want to work with them on this.
And what was their answer to your offer, or what was their answer to the protection you were talking about?
So it's clear that we are only at the beginning of this discussion. I think there was a very strong commitment by them to validate and to implement the recommendations that came from the Rakhine Commission report. That's for us extremely important. We have been waiting for this for years. Finally, we have these recommendations, and these recommendations are very strong. They're very important. So we need to move into the implementation of these recommendations, and that was validated by the government. So we very much welcome this. We also asked for humanitarian access, not just of the Red Cross, and really comprehensive humanitarian access. And I think we heard that some improvements are being made as we speak, but we hope to resume our activities as well in the whole of Rakhine State very soon.
Right. And did it sound that they will have the opportunity for the international humanitarian access shortly, or it may take some long time?
No, I got very clear indications that, for instance, the World Food Programme can start working again, that other organizations are invited. So I think that's a very good start, that's positive. And we need to believe in being able to work with the government of Myanmar and with the communities of Myanmar in order to ensure that the healing starts that has unfortunately been very divisive within the communities of Rakhine State itself. So we will need to start working also on coexistence, on reconciliation, on making sure that there is an acceptance of the Rohingya people, that they belong to the state of Myanmar, and that we work on this together.
Okay. That's quite a good message after 2.5 months, if I'm not wrong. So you also been to Cox's Bazar this time, and you have seen the crisis, a lot of crises you have seen. But what are the major crises that really Bangladesh is about to face in coming months, because we couldn't stop the influx till now. Now the numbers is quite low, but even then people are coming.
We have the highest admiration for what Bangladesh, what the people of Bangladesh, what the communities, what the government of Bangladesh are doing in receiving, admitting refugees from Myanmar. Right. It's wonderful to see this. It's encouraging to see it in today's world. So you are a symbol. Bangladesh is a symbol of hope for people who are in the most distressed situation, most vulnerable situation in the current environment. The situation that we see today, over 600,000 people fleeing into some of the most poorest parts of the country, into Bangladesh, reminds us in the terms of its pace, in terms of its intensity, is something we have not seen since the Rwanda crisis. So what Bangladesh has done has our fullest, deepest appreciation and admiration. And I could witness this myself. I saw the local communities. I saw what people are doing. And that's heartening to see this. And it's encouraging because we don't always get this in other parts of the world. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Bangladesh opened its borders, allowed people in. So now Bangladesh needs our support, our solidarity, our very concrete work. And as you know, we deployed emergency teams to Cox's Bazar. We have a big team there that tries to work around the clock to help Bangladesh cope with this situation and with this crisis.
But what are the major challenges that they are about to face?
The major challenges are, of course, the immediate needs of the people. We need to save their lives. We need to make sure that we find shelter for them. We need to make sure that the facilities work for them. And that's overwhelming. It's overwhelming in any situation. I remember 2015, the situation in Europe, where you had actually less numbers coming, but still big numbers. But if you compare it with the whole of Europe, it was much more manageable, and it was also very difficult at the beginning. So what we need to do is provide that emergency response. And I think we are still in the emergency phase. We're still receiving people. I mean, Bangladesh is still receiving people. So it's clear that a lot of work has to be done in terms of saving lives, finding shelter, ensuring that people can also get on with their lives and find some comfort in this very, very difficult situation. We also need to bear in mind the needs of the host communities.
Right.
That's a lesson learned from any refugee situation around the world that we have ever faced. It's not just response to refugees, it's also response to the host community. And that's what we need to work on.
Yeah, and we have also seen the pledging conference in Geneva, around $440 million being raised for UN and other bodies. But that's only for the sort of 6 months, and we have long way to go. How in this long run, a body like UN can really help us?
So the UN is there to address issues that are of international concern. Refugee issues are a matter of international concern. We know that a country on its own cannot address this. They need support. And that's what Bangladesh, at the moment, and not just now, also in the years to come, they will require international solidarity from the international community, and not just for refugees, also for the affected host communities, for the government that is doing its utmost in the current situation. And we need to mobilize international support and assistance in a sustainable way in the years and months to come where we are faced with this crisis. And that's our biggest challenge, to ensure that there is sustained international attention paid to this situation, to what Bangladesh is doing, and that we fight for it, that we make sure that people understand why it is that people have fled to this country, how Bangladesh is affected, how the communities are affected, especially the local ones, how the government is affected by this, and how we can work together to achieve that result of turning a crisis situation also into possibly a win-win situation for Bangladesh.
Right. So your basic area is for protection of the from the UN. So in this case, in the case of Bangladesh, what are the things that you figured out in your visit?
You see, yesterday along the border, but also in Kutupalong, I was able to talk to refugees. I was talking to older refugees. I was talking to a very old man it's his 4th time that he flees to Bangladesh in his lifetime. Can you imagine? He has been displaced 4 times. He had to be carried in order to to flee to the country. I also saw children. About 3%. First of all, it's about over 50% are children of the population.
Nearly 60%.
Nearly 60%. So out of those, you have about 3% who are unaccompanied or separated.
Right.
So we need to immediately start tracing activities, put measures in place that we identify them, put measures in place that there is proper care for them, and that's what protection means. So you identify those who have very specific needs, and you try to address them. You try to work also with local actors, and I mean, I admired the Bangladesh civil society. You have an incredibly vibrant, dynamic civil society that even not just in Bangladesh, also in other parts of the world has shown the humanitarian spirit, and that's what we need to do. We need to find ways and means how we bridge some of those services to children, to women, to the specific needs. 14% are female-headed single households. So you know what that means also for, so that the services can be provided to them, that we address their livelihood issues. There's very specific vulnerabilities and work with them. And I think there Bangladesh has incredible experience. We just need to support them and make sure that they respond to this very specific situation of refugees.
On this point, we have to take our break and we'll come back and we'll discuss more about it. দর্শক, আমরা আলোচনা করছিলাম ভলকার তার্কের সাথে, যিনি কাজ করছেন ইউএনএইচসিআর অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট হাই কমিশনার ফর প্রোটেকশন, এবং ওনার একটা উদ্বেগের জায়গা হচ্ছে যে এইবার যারা বাংলাদেশে এসছে তাদের মধ্যে একটি বড় অংশ হচ্ছে শিশু এবং কিছু বৃদ্ধও রয়েছেন। এদের প্রোটেকশনের জায়গাটা খুব জরুরি এবং প্রত্যেকের নিজ আলাদা আলাদা প্রয়োজন আছে। এই প্রয়োজনকে মাথায় রেখে সরকার নিঃসন্দেহে অনেক ভালো কাজ করছে, কিন্তু প্রয়োজনগুলোকে মাথায় রেখে প্রত্যেকের প্রয়োজনকে নিরাপদ করাটাই তারা সহযোগিতা করবে বাংলাদেশকে সরকারের সাথে। আমরা আলোচনার এই পর্যায়ে বিরতি নিচ্ছি, সাথে থাকুন, ফিরছি একটু পর। আমন্ত্রণ আরো একবার জানতে চাই শুনতে চাইতে আমরা কথা বলছি মিস্টার ভলকার তার্কের সাথে। Welcome to the show once again, Mr. Volker Tark. As we've been talking about the protection, for my viewers, will you specifically mention few challenges that we need to address right now?
So it's clear that child protection is one. Children are fleeing and are part of that population. Over 60% of the refugees are children. 3% of them are unaccompanied and separated children. So we need to find measures and means to address their needs. But there are also, we need to see the impact that the refugee situation has on the host communities. That's extremely key because host communities have to share sometimes access to schooling, access to services. We need to make sure that we support host communities. And just to give you an example, in the 90s, for instance, we actually managed, UNHCR was able to build roads in some of those parts of the country where refugees fled from Myanmar. They supported hospitals, and these are the type of things that we have to do now again. I mean, we just delivered hospital beds and support to those local hospitals that are particularly affected by the refugee situation. So this analysis of what we can do to support the host community is extremely important, and that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and do you share this challenge or the way to solve it ways with Bangladesh government as well?
Yes, of course. We work in close collaboration with the Bangladesh government. I had a chance to meet all the local officials in Cox's Bazar area. I was very impressed by their motivation, by their commitment, by their understanding, by their willingness to engage with us. In fact, they are in the lead. We are there to support them. But we have a long-standing partnership and history together. I mean, we have been in this area since the beginning of the 90s. So we build on that very strong relationship, on that partnership that I must say is very strong, especially in the Cox's Bazar area.
But don't you think that as this fastest growing influx in the whole world, we have to train them, to give them some capacity to handle them properly? Maybe for first time they don't know what are the primary issues and the secondary issues and for the long run issues.
There's a lot of expertise that you have in Bangladesh, but of course, given the fact that you have more than 600,000 people in the country, there is a need to build capacities, to reinforce capacities. And we have, in fact, We're just in the process of finalizing an agreement to boost the capacity of some of those respondents that are there, both from the government side but also from the civil society side. And we have, again, long-standing partnerships with some of the local actors there. It's not so much an expertise about providing assistance, and it's more about understanding what the refugee character is, that these are people who are refugees, but also boosting the capacity in terms of personnel for those entities of the government that are dealing with them. But we are only at the start of this, because, you know, this emergency started a couple of weeks ago. So we need to act very fast to respond and to support.
Are you
the
acting
government.
very fast?
We are certainly acting very fast. Within a couple of weeks, we managed to triple our response. We are sending the best people in, to, especially in Cox's Bazar, so that they can look after shelter issues, the water and sanitation facilities, trying to support the health sector, the response by the government, making sure that we address the protection issues. And, you know, my speciality is protection. When it comes to identifying those who have very specific needs, that we are able to respond to them. So yes, we have deployed an emergency team. We have made available our whatever budgetary space we have. We take it extremely seriously. We're working around the clock to deal with, and in support of the government, to deal with this influx.
That's good to know. And as you know that the government officially calling these refugees is forcibly displaced citizens of Myanmar. How do you see this from your point of view?
Yeah, for the United Nations, the people who fled into Myanmar are refugees. In fact, they're textbook refugees. They fled institutionalized discrimination. They have fled a situation of statelessness. So they're also stateless people. They have fled a repression that has been going on for quite some time, which is actually recognized by the government of Myanmar. And as a result, they have established this Rakhine Commission. So it is clear that there is an issue that needs to be resolved. And since it's not resolved, they had to flee. So for us, they are refugees, not just for UNHCR, for the UN as a whole. The Secretary General was very clear about this. They are refugees. So we have to deal with them as refugees. So I think it's important to make sure that we understand, and words matter in this, what it means to be a refugee. It is a sign to the international community that international solidarity is needed. And we need to, as a result, call them who they are, because it triggers that type of international solidarity response. Last year in New York, the leaders of the United Nations adopted, including Bangladesh, adopted the New York Declaration on Refugees and Migrants. It had in it a comprehensive refugee response framework, precisely for the type of situations that we are seeing right in front of our eyes today.
Right. On this point, we have to take another break, and we'll come back after the break and we'll discuss more about the future. দর্শক, আমরা আলোচনা করছিলাম রোহিঙ্গা সমস্যা, বিশেষ করে এই মুহূর্তে জাতিসংঘ, শরণার্থী সংস্থা সহ অন্যান্য সংস্থা বাংলাদেশকে কিভাবে সহযোগিতা করছে এবং ভবিষ্যতে কাজ করতে চায়। পাশাপাশি আমরা কথা বলছিলাম জোরপূর্বক বাস্তুহারা মিয়ানমারের নাগরিক নাকি শরণার্থী, সংজ্ঞায়নের নানান ধরনের আলোচনা করছিলাম। এই আলোচনা চলতে থাকবে, সাথে থাকুন, ফিরছি একটি বিরতির পর। আমন্ত্রণ আরেকবার জানতে শুনতে চাইতে আমরা কথা বলছিলাম জাতিসংঘের শরণার্থী বিষয়ক সংস্থা UNHCR Assistant High Commissioner for Protection, Mr. Volker Turk's সাথে। Welcome to the show once again. As we've been discussing about the definition of how we should be taken and how UN should have taken it, will you please clarify what are the benefits and outcome of what are the benefits of calling refugees?
So if you call refugees who they are, it means that you actually make it a matter of international concern. That's important, because international matters such as refugee issues is one that requires the support of the whole of the international community. So it triggers a response by the international community. That is important, because it also makes sure that as a result, the international community has to find a solution. A solution which also means creating the conditions for return, making sure that a country such as Bangladesh is supported. And not just now in the emergency phase, also in the future. It also means that it's not just the refugee response, that there is also a need to support the host community and the government of Bangladesh, and not just now, also in the future. And that's why it is important to call them refugees, because...
What if I don't call him, or if we don't call them refugee?
Well, if you don't call them refugee, we consider them refugees, so we will act in any case as if you were to call them refugees, if you see what I mean. So for us, for the UN, they are refugees. So we will act because we have a responsibility towards these people as well. It's a responsibility that was entrusted to us by the international community, and we act to that in response. So we hope that even the labeling, whatever it takes, that for us the response will always be a refugee one, because we care about this as an issue of words that matter, but also as an issue to trigger and activate international solidarity in support of Bangladesh, given the fact that you are facing this crisis at the moment.
And is that going to matter when these people when the repatriation process will be started?
Well, for instance, in the context of any agreements about return, the issue will arise, who is going to be the organization within the UN that has a mandate for this? And it is UNHCR. We are the UN Refugee Agency. So in the context of returns, where we have 70 years of history to work on conditions, on identifying obstacles, on making sure that the principles and standards of return are respected. And that's what the protection responsibility is, not just of us as an organization, but also of all member states of the United Nations, irrespective of whether or not they have signed the 1951 Convention, the Refugee Convention. But that actually these standards are respected in the context of return. It helps us to work on the solution side. And that's because we have a mandate to work on solutions with governments. So in that sense, it is also important to call them refugees, because the solutions mandate is triggered, if you like.
Okay. So as Bangladesh is not calling them refugees, is it going to be create a problematic situation when we send these people back? Do you think the Myanmar government may pull off?
Well, you know, Myanmar and Bangladesh have both realized that there is an issue about organizing eventual return. We had the experience of the 90s. Initially, these were bilateral discussions between the two governments. Eventually, UNHCR was involved by both governments because it was seen as an added value, as a comparative advantage, precisely because the credibility of a return process internationally is an international affair. It depends on the involvement of the structure of the United Nations that has a responsibility for it. That's why we were created in the first place, precisely to address issues of international concern between countries, among countries.
And did you share your concern with our government, with the Bangladeshi government?
Well, I'm going to see the government ministers in the next couple of days, but the High Commissioner was here both in July but also in September. So we are obviously in constant contact with the Bangladesh government. I think they understand that we consider them as refugees. I think there's a lot of understanding of our position. We hope that in effect, in the practical application of it, that we are able to help and support Bangladesh in the way that it is needed, in the spirit also of this declaration that was adopted by the leaders of the United Nations last year in New York.
Right. So what are the ways, or what is the future plan, effectively UNHCR going to put in the role to help Bangladesh to solve the crisis?
So we will continue our discussions with the Myanmar government. We will continue our activities in Rakhine State. We will continue our activities in Bangladesh. The emergency response is not over. And as we speak, yes, there has been a decrease. It's no longer the numbers that we see, but still people are coming. We have to address and respond, and I was very heartened by what I saw, by the motivation of the government officials, of the international organizations, of of our staff, our colleagues that are working on the ground, to actually deal with the utmost needs that people have when they arrive, when they are sheltered. We know that it's going to get colder, so we need to respond to that as well. But we must not lose sight of the needs of the host communities, and that's the next big step. How can we deal, how can we work together to identify a response that takes into account the impact that the refugee influx has on host communities. And we will need to mobilize international assistance, solidarity, not just for now, but also for the months and possibly years to come.
Yeah. Do you have any forecast of these issues? I mean, say for example, as the people are not stopped coming to Bangladesh yet, so any forecast of the issue that there may be 100,000 people or more, 200,000 people may come in coming days?
I see what I mean. I think we have already over 600,000 who came over the last couple of weeks. We also have about 300,000 who were there before. So if we look at the numbers at the moment, yes, they have come down. It's very difficult to predict what happens tomorrow. It was encouraging to see that Aung San Suu Kyi went to Rakhine State a couple of days ago. She also went to Mongdo and to northern Rakhine State. So there is clearly an engagement also on the part of the Myanmar government. So we hope very much. We can never give up hope for the people that we all care for. So we hope very much that indeed there will be a situation where we can see again a reconnection of the communities, support for Bangladesh, and hopefully a solution for this crisis.
And how this can be done, the solution can be done?
I think continued international engagement is crucial.
Where, in Myanmar or in Bangladesh?
In the whole situation. Because, of course, Bangladesh is the most affected, but it's also Myanmar. That this is seen as a matter of concern to the international community as a whole. That it is seen as something that requires the solidarity, not just of human beings as we see them daily in Cox's Bazar, but also of all countries of the United Nations. That we see it as something that that concerns us all as human beings. That's the case that we have to make, not just now, but also in the months to come.
But for reality, the Myanmar seems quite reluctant on this issue. If that is happening, how this can be solved?
Well, we have to see, things change. The fact that we were received last week is a positive sign. The fact that there are ongoing discussions about what we can do as a UN in this type of situation is a positive sign. So we have to build on all of this. We cannot give up hope. We need to sustain that. At the same time, we also need to ensure that Bangladesh gets the support, gets the solidarity that you so much require in this very critical period of this situation, which is a compelling one, which is one that we all need to work on together.
As we are about to end the show, what would be your take to your headquarters?
A strong encouragement that we need to do the utmost to support Bangladesh. A strong encouragement also to the other countries in the member states of the UN that they need to keep their attention on it, which means that, we have talked about the Syria crisis in the past. The Syria situation that started over 6 years ago is one today that requires sustained support. That's the same with Bangladesh. If we don't find a solution soon, we will need to make sure that you get all the support that you need and turn this into a win-win situation for the country. As difficult as this may sound today, but it could be a strong investment in the future of Bangladesh, especially in the Cox's Bazar area, where also some of the communities are under the poverty line. Maybe let's use it as an opportunity to develop this part of the country. Infuse investments and development that benefits both refugees as well as the host community. So there could also be the potential for a win-win situation.
What kind of investment you are looking at?
For instance,
thinking of
development issues of private sector, and it's complementary. I'm not saying that this should replace anything. No. It's absolutely clear that this has to be in recognition of what Bangladesh is doing today. It's what we call responsibility sharing. The responsibility that we have together as an international community. So sometimes, and I know that this is difficult and it may sound sometimes even strange to your viewers, but actually what we're trying to achieve is how we can make out of a crisis and turn it into an opportunity for the country and for the host communities that are affected. Making sure that the World Bank becomes engaged, for example, that bigger development actors become engaged, that it's actually turned into an opportunity.
Thank you so much for coming to my show and sharing your knowledge and experience. And I believe, I would love to be hopeful like you, that the crisis will be solved and Bangladesh and Myanmar will have a win-win situation. And most importantly, the humanitarian crisis will be solved. Thank you, Mr. Volker.
Thank you.
দর্শক, আমরা আলোচনা করছিলাম ইউএনএইচসিআর অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট হাই কমিশনার ফর প্রোটেকশন মিস্টার ফলকার তার্কের সাথে। তিনি আশাবাদী এই মানবিক সমস্যা একদিন সমাধান হবে এবং বাংলাদেশ ও মিয়ানমার একটি উইন উইন সিচুয়েশন আসবে, যেখানে জয় হবে মানবাধিকতা। দেখা হবে আগামী পর্বে।